omniscient and almighty, starting with the elderly wolf uncle chapter 10. As for tonight's firefight, it is happening all the time. Rao is the citizens living nearby are used to it, and no one will call the police. Because, when there is a problem with a system, often the biggest problem is the ruler at the top. Chaos, dirt, betrayal, turmoil. This is Gotham. The light emitted by the gunfire is still dazzling, and the crazy emotions of the crowd are still exciting. At this moment, everyone did not notice one thing. The yellow-skinned boy who fell earlier, his eyelashes touched slightly, and then he suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 13. A mortal body. One person slaughters the entire gang. Chen Tian frowned slightly and slowly stood up on the ground. The soreness in his body made him feel a little uncomfortable. In the endless gunfire, such a faint movement seemed weak and inaudible. But the figure standing up in the darkness quickly attracted the attention of the people around him, and everyone noticed the movement and looked back with their brows furrowed. And they couldn't help but have some doubts when they saw the blurry figure. When are there more individuals? Soon, someone saw the foreground with the help of light, and his face gradually became terrified, and he shouted, "It's that guy just now, he's not dead." Quote. This exclamation instantly woke everyone up, and in an instant, fear spread rapidly through the crowd, and the expressions on their faces suddenly froze. The gangsters released their fingers that clenched the trigger and stared wide-eyed at the unbelievable scene in front of them. They all knew very well that under such fierce fire, even a cow could not stop the rush of bullets, let alone a thin teenager. Unless, the yellow-skinned boy is not a human at all, and only the demons that exist in legends can come back from the dead. Everyone's expressions froze and stiffened, almost subconsciously holding their breath, and their slightly constricted pupils were full of shocked emotions. In the dim alley, there was a dead silence. Reddish muzzles, shell casings on the ground, smoke from gunfire. Let the strange atmosphere go further, and at this moment, the solemnity of death quietly hangs over everyone's heads, which is the fear of suffocating in the face of unknown creatures. The little leader swallowed his spit with difficulty, and his voice began to tremble slightly from fear oppression. My God. The person who should have died was standing alive in front of him, but he had seen the bullet penetrate the other party's body before, and the other party was covered in blood holes. Although there are many crazy people in Gotham City, he is the first time he has seen a person who has come back from the dead. The little leader swallowed, his lips slightly open and squeezed out, "What the fuck are you, a monster?" Quote. Hearing this, all the subordinates next to him also came to their senses, and aimed their muzzles at Chen Tian in unison. Surviving in Gotham, what they learned is that everything can be solved with the barrel of a gun in the face of unknown things. Meanwhile, Bruce, standing on the roof next to the alley, Wayne, naturally, also noticed the change that occurred below. He poked his head out of the bunker and cautiously looked at the scene below. When he saw Chen Tian who had already stood up, Bruce's pupils shrank sharply, and his tone showed strong disbelief. How is it possible? At this time, Chen Tian's appearance was very terrifying, and I am afraid that no matter who saw it, he would feel very terrifying. Although the alley is very dark, the strong smell of blood cannot be fake. Through the faint light, it is not difficult to see that his body is covered with bloody holes, and he can't find any intact places. Even the left side of his face has been broken in half. And the blood and flesh turned out are extremely hideous. But Chen Tian at this time, he's laughing. Under the pull of the muscles, the wounds on the face become even more terrifying. However, in the next second, these blood holes that were almost all over the body began to heal quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the continuous contraction and relaxation of the muscles, one warhead after another is expelled from the body, and the warhead falls to the ground, reflecting the unique luster of metal. After landing, it bounced up slightly, making a crisp sound. Chen Tian stretched out his palm, touched the skin that had recovered as well, and sneered, "Ha. This is the self-healing factor in the body that plays a role. As long as the physical body is not completely destroyed, theoretically, he can still come back from the dead in extreme circumstances. The previous death was just a sleep. Just being able to heal itself does not mean losing pain. The sharp pain of the bullet through the body will not dissipate, and even because there is no death, the pain of the blood hole in the body is always accompanied." Chen Tian's anger surged in his heart, and his gaze towards the gangster seemed to be looking at a group of dead people. Bruce, who was on the roof, witnessed all this, feeling that the worldview he had cultivated over the years had been completely destroyed. And he had seen many madmen in Gotham for many years when he was young, but he had never seen someone like Chen Tian. Gotham City. Sure enough, there are only maniacs and normal people. What the hell are you, a monster? The little leader questioned again. His trembling voice and terrified tone exposed the fear in his heart, feeling the coldness in the other party's eyes, and a faint creepy creep in his heart. You haven't seen much. Chen Tian replied with a sneer, leaned over and picked up the dagger that Bruce had dropped from his previous fight on the ground. And the dagger that glowed with cold light flew flexibly between his fingers, like a flexible silverfish. The young man played with the dagger and walked in the direction where the little leader was. His pace seemed very leisurely. The little leader had seen Chen Tian's inhuman ability, and his heart had long been filled with fear, and looking at Chen Tian, who was constantly approaching, he subconsciously took several steps back. Before the battle, it has already been stunned. The little leader couldn't suppress the fear in his heart, and roared with a distorted face, "Shoot! Kill him for me." Seeing this, the surrounding subordinates did not hesitate to pull the trigger. In an instant, a huge gunshot sounded again, echoing over Gotham City, but these bullets obviously could not stop Chen Tian's footsteps. In the flickering firelight, Chen Tian's knees were slightly bent, and his feet suddenly burst out with huge power, directly facing the gunfire and killing towards the crowd. He is a mutant himself and possesses physical qualities beyond normal. Coupled with the top-notch fighting skills he had previously acquired, his ability to control the situation allowed him to use the favorable terrain around him very flexibly, constantly shuttling through the crowd to avoid incoming bullets. Bruce's dagger, the guns on the gangsters, and the shattered bricks on the ground. Any object that can be touched turns into a deadly weapon in his hand. With just one face, he had already killed several people who stood in his way, and the hot blood spilled on the ground, and the fishy smell mixed with gunsmoke, turning into a disgusting complex gas. At this time, several corpses had fallen in the alley. Their faces were hideous and their pupils constricted, as if they had experienced great fear during their lives. In the end, Chen Tian rushed straight to the little leader. In the other party's terrified gaze, Chen Tian's hand rose and fell, his movements were extremely fast, and the icy blade pierced the neck of the little leader. Immediately afterwards, the arm led the wrist, bursting out with great power, causing the dagger to slash in a circle, and blood bloomed in the night, exuding a cruel fragrance. Chen Tian grabbed the little leader by the hair and jerked it upwards. A bloody head, just held in his hand. The rest of the people looked at the scene in front of them in horror, and immediately realized that they were not a person at all, but monster. The gun that used to be held in his hand was the truth, but now the bullets can't stop this monster. Forced by strong fear, the surviving gang members fled around because of fear, and the guns in their hands were also thrown on the ground, for fear that the monsters behind them would target them. Then, Bruce upstairs. Wayne slid down the rope to the ground, and he had just stood on the roof of the building and witnessed everything. Not only did he have the world's best fighting ability, even with a near-immortal body, in the past, such a person would only appear in Norse mythology, that is a god. He took a deep breath and looked at the body everywhere, his face solemn and cold. What kind of person are you? Chen Tian glanced at Bruce lightly and said something that made his heart tighten. Don't be nervous, Bruce. Suddenly, the air solidified again. Chapter 14. I want Clark Kent's files. Movement in the trunk. The dark and damp alley fell into an eerie silence again. Bruce's face suddenly solemnized when he heard his name, and his originally calm heart suddenly sank, and even his heartbeat couldn't help but speed up a little. He looked at Chen Tian with a frown, and his eyes on his mask showed vigilance. The fact that the teenager in front of him, who had never met before, knew himself, made Bruce Wayne feel trepidation in his heart. His identity as Batman is only known to Butler AFU. Bruce Wayne took a deep breath and pretended to be calm, so he suddenly asked, "What are you talking about?" Quote. Although he had tried his best to control it, his voice processed by diacriticism was still a little muffled. Chen Tian saw what was in Bruce's mind and smiled back. I'm not interested in hurting you. If I did, you would have died last night. Quote. Bruce Wayne's eyes narrowed slightly, the essence under his eyes flashed, and his hands couldn't help but shake up. And the picture of the boy coming back from the dead before began to emerge in his mind, which could not be dispersed for a long time. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew in his heart that if the other party really wanted to kill him, it would be difficult for him to escape. First chapter previous chapter 10 186 next chapter epilogue table of contents.